Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the session. My name is Dottie Vance, and I'll be taking you through today's training session. I'm also joined virtually by some of my colleagues who are going to speak up during our Q&A portion to help provide any clarity that's needed. In addition, I have Mo, who's on this call, who's my producer. She's helping out today with monitoring your questions. You'll see that she's throwing some links in the chat for you to follow along with, and she'll be doing that throughout today's training. So this morning, we're here to talk about changes being implemented as part of the Hybrid Resources Phase 2C RIMS pre-market simulation training. To increase transparency and provide greater service to our stakeholders, we are recording this webinar. It will be posted on our website sometime after, so you can review it in the future, or for those who are unable to attend today's call. These slides are also posted on our training center under the Releases, Initiatives, and Readiness Notes section, as well as Mo's posting a link in the chat. Now, after today's training, depending on the questions that we get in, as well as market simulation activities, these slides could be updated. And if they are, I will send them out to everyone, as well as post the latest slides on the training center. Now, before we get started today, I did want to go over some housekeeping. So just some reminders, if we can please remain on mute. This is going to help with some background noise to make sure that things run smoothly. We do have two options for you to ask your questions. You can either put that in the chat and we'll get back to you a response, or you can use the raised hand icon feature that's in WebEx. And this is going to signal to us that you'd like to verbally ask your question. Now, for today's training, we do have designated stopping points for Q&A. So at any point you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. And when we get to that stopping point, we'll be sure to call on you. Additionally, when we do call on you, we'll ask that you please say your name, your organization, and then your question. So now that we have the housekeeping out of the way, let's go into what we're going to be talking about on the agenda. So for today's training, we are going to be talking about a few things. And that first thing is going to be our summary. So we're going to review who's impacted, that project timeline as well, when you should be expecting things. Then we're going to talk about a new column, a component ID. This is a small change in RIMS that we'll start with first, and I'll show you what that is, what you need to know about it. The next thing we'll talk about is the RIMS web form. So this will be a bulk of today's training. I'll walk through how it's replacing that site information sheet for the solar and the wind component, as well as I'll pull up the application itself and I'll go through a demo with you so you can see the slides as like an extra helper, and then the demo is going to be something for us to go through and fill out together. The next thing we're going to be talking about is some documents. So we're going to walk through the three documents: the topo map, the share file, and the sharing agreement. We'll talk about what that looks like, what you need to know for uploading that into RIMS, and as well as some examples. And then the last thing we'll talk about is market simulation and wrap up. I know we got some questions about access, and so I'll be addressing those there, as well as the timeline for what you need to do in your actions. So now that we've gone through our training agenda, it's jam-packed with some great material. Let's get into that summary. So let's talk about who's this impacting, who's our target audience for this material. And that's going to be our resource owners. Specifically, it's going to be a resource owner who's participating in the new resource implementation process. That could either be adding a new resource to something in the future. Maybe they're currently onboarding a resource, so this will be good for them to have an understanding of. And then specifically, we want to call out those project types that have a wind and solar component, so the hybrid and co-located resource. And we'll talk about what that means here in just a moment. So the next thing I want to talk to you today about is our project timeline. So you'll see here we have a few dates, the first being that shapefile software. So we talked about this in the release user group in early February. We did a presentation as well as provided a readiness note. We also sent out some communication just to start that conversation of shapefiles, as well as figuring out the software that maybe your organization needs. And we'll get into details when we get to the document section. Today, we're doing our external training, so this is a great resource for you to prepare before we go to market simulation. Now, you'll notice for market simulation, we currently don't have a date yet. However, we are figuring out the remaining details, and we're going to be sending out a communication as well as updates in our market simulation forum for all the details you're going to need about market simulation and when that's going to be. I also have linked here the BRS that kind of outlines this project, as well as details on the market simulation. And then the last date you'll see on the timeline of this project is the production activation. So what that means is when you're going to see these changes in the RIMS application itself in that production environment. And that date currently is April 9th. Currently it's that. If market simulation, depending on the dates and the testing, that could change, and we'll be sure to keep you updated if it does. So now that we've gone through this timeline, we have an understanding of what we're going through. Let's go into that first topic that we're here to discuss, which is that new column in the component ID. So the first page I'll talk to you about is navigating in RIMS. So to get to this, you're going to log into RIMS, you'll see Market Participant Portal, and you're trying to get to that project view. So you'll click View on whatever assigned a project you have, and that's how we're going to get to this column initially. Now, I do want to call out that this screen that I'm showing you right now, nothing's changing in RIMS here. It's when we get into the project view when you'll see a slight change. So we go in, we click the View button, and now we're going to see our general project information. So this should look familiar. You'll see your project name, project description, and then if you go towards the bottom of the megawatt by fuel type, you'll see a table called Fuel Type and Megawatt. On this table, you'll see I have highlighted here on the screen, there's this component ID column. And so this is the new area that we're going to be talking about today. To give you some more background on the component ID and what this means for you, is this is something that's only going to be for the configuration types of a hybrid or a hybrid and co-located configuration. And what they are is they're system generated. It's an identifier for a wind and solar fuel type. So you'll see here in the example, there's wind, solar, it shows wind 1, solar 1, and so on. What's nice about the RIMS application is you are able to edit on the UI itself. There's a pencil icon that you'll be able to select, and you can either change your fuel type or you can add a wind and solar fuel type depending on what edits your organization is making. And I do want to show you an example just so we can understand that naming convention of the wind and solar type. So for this example, let's say you upload your project details form and you've indicated that you have 4 fuel types. You have 2 wind and you have 2 solar. So in your component ID, you'll see wind 1, wind 2, solar 1, solar 2. Now, hypothetically, you've realized, you know what, I need to make wind 1. That needs to be battery. Fortunately for RIMS, you are able to update that and you can change it to battery. You'll see here that because you've selected battery and you've filled out the necessary components, that your component ID has disappeared because it's no longer a wind or solar. And now, again, just hypothetically, you put battery and you realize, ooh, actually, you know what, wind was correct. Wind is actually what I would like. RIMS is great. You can go in and edit it. And you'll see that that component ID reappears once you fill in the appropriate fields, and you'll see wind 3. So it just shows how it goes up. So if you were to do it again, it would be wind 4. For solar, if you were to change it, it would be solar 3, and so on. So that's the main summary for component ID column. I know it's a small section on a table, but we did want to show you that naming convention as well as indicating that it is there for you. I want to stop and see if folks have any questions about that before we get into the web form. So Mo, I'll pass it over to you to see if we have any initial questions.
Thank you, Dottie. I'm looking in the chat box. I don't see any questions. As Dottie mentioned, if you'd like to ask your question, please use the hand raise interactive. So locate at the bottom to ask your question. At this time, Dottie, I'm not seeing any hand raised or questions in the chat. Back to you, Dottie.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so this next section that we're going to be talking about is our RIMS web form. So this is a great option. It's new. It's replacing that site information sheet that we talked about. And so currently what users are doing is they're downloading an Excel spreadsheet that's located on the new resource implementation page. It's under that section called Bucket 1, Full Network Model and Forecast Preparation. If you go to the page currently, you'll see this as well. It has a sample site for wind and a sample site for solar information, as well as those actual Excel formats that you fill out and you upload into RIMS. You'll see here, you go to the documents and you upload it, and this is that current process. For the new process, we are going to get rid of this site info Excel sheets, and they're going to be replaced with this web form. So on RIMS, you'll see there's an STF information, and under it, you're going to see project type, address, plant location, and then you'll see a table called components. And so these components line up with that component ID column that I talked about earlier, how you see if you put in a wind and solar, it populates down here, and each component is going to get its own page that you'll be editing. So for here, you see wind, you'll click view and it'll open up the web form, and then same thing with solar. Now, I do want to make some comparison just so we have an understanding of, okay, what's the difference? Is there any material that's going to be different? And for the most part, no. The main difference that we're focusing on to show you is that the web form, the platform that you're submitting this information is different. The content you should be familiar with. You've submitted it through the Excel. It's just going to look slightly different now that it's no longer that Excel format. And so just to show like a few examples for you, if we see on the Excel sheet that we have highlighted with that orange box, you'll see plant type as well as the if thermal, please state hours or percent. On the web form itself, you'll see similarly, you'll see under the solar site information, there's a solar plant type with a drop-down menu, and it has these information. It's no longer the acronym, as well as if thermal, please put the hours or percent. And you see that there's buttons for that as well. So same material, just slightly different formatting. And then the same thing with at the bottom, if you see plant location, you'll see corner 1, 2, 3, and 4. On the new web form, it's going to look like this, where you add those 4 corners. There's validations that are in RIMS to make sure that you do include 4 and that they're unique. And I'll talk about that once we get a little bit more into the web form itself. But that's just to show you the comparison between the two. Okay, so if we continue, let's talk through the solar. So what we're going to do is I'll go through the solar component web form through the slides with you, and then I'll pause and I'll pull up the application and we'll go through the wind one through the actual application, just so you can kind of see what they both look like. And then the slides that we have for wind are a great reference for you to go back to after this training that you can use as like a job aid. So for the solar web form, when you log into RIMS and you hit select on that component, you'll see solar STF solar 1, so that component ID. You'll see different drop downs. So when you hit the plus button, it shows you the information under each section. The nice thing about RIMS is there are validations in place. So at each section level, there's going to be save icons that you're able to select and it'll validate, as well as when we hit save at the top, there's a validation that runs in RIMS. And it's just to make sure the information you're putting is accurate and corresponds with your project. If we continue, so if we start first with the solar site information, you'll see if you click a pencil icon, it now shows an X and a check mark, and that's just how you save or you can get out of it. There's drop-down menu options, so you can select what type of plant type it is, as well as if it is thermal, it'll indicate for you that you should put how much, and if it's the hours or the percent. The next section is that 4 corners that I talked about. So for here, at a minimum, RIMS runs a validation that you put in 4 coordinates. So those 4 columns that you see, you'll hit the add plus button, and you'll be able to enter your information. Once it is accurate, you can hit the save icon, and it'll save it for you. There's also typical with other tables here, you can delete them if you put too many, or maybe if you need to change it, you can do that as well, all on the RIMS UI. I believe in RIMS also, there's no limit for how many entries you put. It'll just run that validation that there are 4 unique corners. So the next part, if we move down on the web form, is the capacity information section. So you'll see here, once you click it, you're able to put in the megawatts. There's also, I know for solar, AC capacity and DC capacity. I believe when you try to hit save, if you leave that blank, it's going to indicate to you that, hey, you have to put a number in for this because it is a solar component. And I'll show you that here. It shows as red. And I'll show you when we pull up the wind web form what that looks like as well. But what's nice, again, with this application is as you're going through, it's going to tell you real time what needs to be changed or what needs to be updated. So if we continue through, you'll see that the web form, we go down. For solar, let's say hypothetically that you are going to do a sharing agreement. Again, it's only if applicable and if your organization has this and wants to do it. You'll see that there are validations in place to make sure that you put the ISO project number, best station shared, as well as that sharing agreement date. So those validations trigger once you select yes. If you were to put no, those validations, they would just be grayed out boxes. And then on the side, you'll notice the tables are very similar throughout. So same features if you hit the add plus button, the pencil icon, the trash icon, and things like that are similar throughout. You're also able to move the tables around a little bit. So if you need to zoom in or change it to how you like to view a table, and I'll show you that on the walkthrough, you're able to do that. So if we continue, again, we'll go farther down. There's another table that you're able to go through. Some of these are free text. Some of these are you put in numbers. It just depends on what it's calling for. And there's going to be validations in place here as well, telling you, hey, you have to put a numeric value, or no, this is not required. There's also drop-down menu options. I believe there's a checkbox option as well for one of these, which I can show you. But very user-friendly. You hit the save icon, very similar to the other tables that we talked about. And then just to show you again for that save icon, the validations will run to tell you if anything needs to change or be updated. And then this last section specifically for solar is the solar panel information. Almost identical, just different information than what we just saw. So you'll see you'll put your manufacturer, your model, and so on. Because it is quite a bit of information, you can use the scroll bar icon at the bottom to see the remaining boxes when you're in RIMS. And again, there's validations in place for that as well. And so after you finish and you put through your information, you're content, you've run it, the next thing you'll do is you'll hit save at the top, and this will run a bigger validation of your information. So I do have a screenshot of kind of what that looks like if you were to hit save and you did get an error message. It would indicate to you exactly what's missing and what needs to be fixed. So you'll see here that the AC capacity, DC capacity needs to be entered. The solar site corners, I need a minimum of 4. The location as well, and a few other things that I need to make sure I add. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions folks have about this. And I'll pass it to you, Mel, and I'm going to pull up the web form for wind while we're doing this.
Perfect. Thank you, Dottie. We have a couple questions. Oh, we do have a hand raised. I'm going to start off with that. Christina Gallegos, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good morning, Mo. It's Tina. I had a question in regards to, so I understand that, so there's a validation on just the 4 corners and their coordinates, but they can add more corners, right? Like if somebody has 20 corners, like does it max out at a certain point?
That's a great question. There isn't like you can put as many as you want. So if they do have 20, yes, that is fine. They can put 20.
Okay, and then what about the Met stations? Is that kind of the same logic with that? If they
Yes,
want to
you
have
can. I think
12 Met stations on there, they can add that?
yes. I believe the validation is just you have to have at least one, like one row, so you can have as many. Yep.
Okay. And then one last question, and I'll give some else some room to ask. If they do you guys not want the Met agreement uploaded any longer? We're just kind of entering in the data, but you guys don't actually want the paper trail of that also?
That's a great question. I know that this replaces the site, that Excel sheet, but I'll look for confirmation on that agreement that you were talking about. Is that, when you say Met agreement, is that sharing at all, or is that?
Yeah, the Met sharing agreement. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we do. We'll have that uploaded if you are sharing. And I'll show you how to upload that. It's a very similar process. Just on the UI form, you'll just indicate that, yes, you do have one. You'll still upload that document.
Okay, cool. Okay. All right, I'll pass the mic to somebody else. Thank you, guys. This is awesome. I'm excited to see this stuff.
Of
Thanks,
course.
Tina.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Great
Dottie.
questions.
So Dottie, we have two questions in the chat, and they're both from Alina. Alina's first question was, is there any way to customize the field identifier so that it responds to an internal component ID? We did have a response from our SMEs on that. The answer is the component ID isn't editable and is assigned in the order that the VER components are entered, such as the first solar component will have the component ID solar 1, second solar would be solar 2, and so on. And that response was added to the chat. Alina's follow-up question was, does the new system validate without changing inputs, but identifying the invalid inputs, or does it simply reject a submission and undo changes? So I'm going to, we don't have a response for that one, but I am going to see if any of our SMEs can respond at this moment. And if we don't have an answer at this time, we can definitely follow up with those questions and share that with you guys. So I'm going to pause real quick to see if our SMEs can answer that at this time.
Yeah, so when you enter a kind of invalid input, it should just highlight that input. I think, Dottie, if you're pulling up the SCF info, that's something we could show. But yeah, I don't believe it should delete that input if it is invalid.
It does not. And I'll show an example when we do the corners. I can show you if I put in something wrong, what that error looks like. Were there any other questions, Mo?
Yes, there's one more question from Brian. His question was, if all fails, will you still provide a direct contact email for queries and support if needed?
First, thank you so much. Second, yeah, we'll provide contact information if you have any support, either via city as well as the team that works on these themselves. I can be sure you get that information, and I'll include it when we send out the presentation. Great question.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Dottie. Dottie, I'm looking at the chat. I don't see any additional questions. I'm also looking to see if there's any hand raised, and I don't see any at this time. So go back to you, Dottie.
I did see one hand. Yes,
Yeah,
yep, I see one hand.
I do have one question from our SME. So will the market participants see anything in the RIM system as far as the resource is concerned?
Could you elaborate on that for me? I think I missed the question.
Okay, I'll get back to you. I'll put something on the chat.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so were there any other questions, Mo, before I continue?
I'm not seeing any other hand raised. I just want to make sure one more time. And I don't see any other questions in the chat. So back to you, Dottie. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. So now that we have the wind form up, you'll see here, it looks very similar to the screenshots, except this is for wind itself. So if I were to close these, if you compare it to your PowerPoint slides, it should be identical. So you'll see wind STF wind 1, that's the component ID that I'm entering. If I were to hit this pencil icon, you'll see it shows as edit, and it wants me to put in megawatts. So for that, I can enter it, and then I'll click, you'll see the checkbox shows validate, and I can run it, and it saves it for me. If I were to go to plant corners, so I can go to add, and let's say I'll do 22 and 22. I'm going to hit the save icon to save it. And it says that modified data was success at the top. You'll see that validation. Now, if I go through again and I say, yeah, I'm going to put 22 and 22 again because I need that, you'll see here at the top, it doesn't change these. It's going to immediately tell me that, here, I'll click it again because it can go away. Wind site corner coordinates must be unique. So it's running that validation to make sure that I'm not putting the duplicate. So, oh, my bad, I meant to put 23. And you'll see that it shows modified data successful. And I am able, so say I walk away, hypothetically, from this plant coordinates, I can continue on and not put the remaining other two. But when I go to hit save, I'm almost positive it's, yeah, it'll give me that error message of, hey, you want to make sure that you have a minimum of 4, as well as the other error message for the things I didn't put in, which I haven't gotten to yet. So I'll go down here and I'll do capacity. You'll see for this, I'll enter information and then megawatts as well. And I can hit save and it saves it for me. If we go down and we open up this section, you'll see that we have the search feature, as well as you can toggle, but you'll hit the plus add button and you can enter your information, your ID numbers. It will tell you that you have to put your LATs, and you'll see that I have this red that'll populate and say it is required. If, say, as I'm going forward and I'm not entering it, it'll tell me, hey, you need to make sure you're entering this information. And I can hit save there. And then hypothetically again, so you can continue and add more rows, and it'll have you do the same as we go through it. So if I keep going down, you'll see this bar icon that I was talking about. So if you're not able to see all information, you can move it like that. You're also able to do a full screen. So if you're someone who maybe you really want to focus on this, you don't want to look at the other icons that are there, you'll be able to. Right now it's showing like this again because we are testing out our system, so there are a few kinks, but it'll be, you'll be able to do that and not have that weird formatting that I just had. So for this, you'll be able to hit add as well. And then if we go through, it's going to show you, yes, you need it. Yeah, you want to make sure that you put this information in. This is the drop-down box that I was kind of talking about. So you're able to hit these buttons depending on if it applies, and then as well as if it's a primary. And then just to show you this last section as well, again, you'll see we can hit add and go through. It has those validations in place to make sure that we're entering the information. Whenever you have a lot of information, so that hypothetical, what if there's 20 corners, or what if we have 50 things? I believe this search field is going to be very helpful for you in that option. Right now, we don't have a lot of data populated, so there's nothing to search at this time, but it is a great feature that you'll be able to use, as well as you're able to kind of move these depending on how you like to view your information. So if you're someone who wants them all to be in a row to read like this, or you see how, for example, number of turb, it doesn't have the rest of the word, you can open it this way to see it. So you're able to play around with the UI to fit your needs. And then here too, you'll see we have drop down if it's a cold weather package, yes or no, hot weather, or if you're like hot weather, what? And then you're able to see, oh, package, yes. And then finally, for turbine locations, very similar. What's nice about the RIMS system is the tables are almost identical, just with different information in it. So it's user-friendly. If you understand how to use one of the tables, the same logic will apply with the others, with the validations as well. And then I believe they're working on this feature. I clicked it earlier, so it may be still a little bit under construction, but I believe you have the option to do like a night mode if you want, or dark mode, and it'll look a little bit differently. Personally, I'm a light mode person, but to each their own, and you're able to play around and have that really unique user-friendly experience. So if you do prefer that and your eyes like it better, you can do that as well. So I'll stop here. I have a few more slides that I'll show you, but I'll stop here on the demo and see if folks have any questions about this, kind of what I just went through showing this example.
Dottie, I'm not seeing any hand raises in the list. And I'm looking at the chat. I don't see any questions on here. So I'm just going to pause real quick, just give some time. But outside of that, no. Oh, actually, Alina has a question. Alina,
Yeah,
go
thanks,
ahead.
Frank. Yeah, so my question is, after all the data for a hybrid resource has been entered and accepted by the system, will there be a report that will show that will there be a new report that will show all the data pertaining to that hybrid resource, which could be downloadable or printable?
That is a great question. I do have, I know the validations that'll go in place if something goes wrong. I might see if we can work with the SME to see if there's any downloadable or if there's an email that goes. So I'll see if we can get that answered for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And my second question pertains to my first question that I had asked, like, if we will be able to see any information after we, after we create a new resource in RIMS. And for that new resource, will we be able to see any new information?
When you create a new resource and new information, is it like when, if you could elaborate, I think, and maybe if it's me, if you understand the question a little bit more, like if you'll see, in addition to like these web forms, if you'll see anything else new, or?
Yeah, I'm not.
Oh, cool.
Or what I can do is I'll try to understand the question more from our SMEs, and then if I have a chance, I can either put it on the chat, or maybe I can just raise a city ticket later on.
Okay, yeah. Matt, did you want to, I think I heard you come off mute also. Did you want to add to anything?
Yeah, I guess regarding the first question, I'm not sure I totally grasped the second question, but regarding the first question, after you kind of successfully save off the site information form, you'll have an option to submit. And then once you submit, if all the validations pass, you should get a confirmation that that has happened. I don't believe we have anything that lets you kind of download the information, but you still will be able to have a view, a read-only view of the information that you entered after you submitted.
Thank you.
And I do see we have another hand raised. Christina, if you want to come off mute and ask your question.
Yeah, it was just a kind of a follow-up question, Matt, to what you had just said. So we input all this information, we hit save, it does a validation on everything. Is there going to be like when you say there's a notification, is it gonna, like, would we see like a project memo in RIMS that, or like maybe down in the, where's the other section in RIMS? Because like, is there like a log that says like, this has been submitted and within 10 to 15 days, you should hear a reply back, something like that?
So once you enter the info in the site info form, and then you go back and then upload the other kind of documents, there'll be an option to submit. And then after things are submitted, then I believe there should be a note in the project memo section that says that info has been submitted. And I believe you might get an email saying that has passed all validations and like has successfully been submitted. I'd need to confirm that piece, but you should be able to see that the information has been successfully submitted after you hit that submit button, which I don't think we've shown yet, but might be in a future slide.
Yeah, I've got so many questions, but I'm sure you guys are gonna cover some of the stuff in the presentation. But when you say submit other documents, like we're not still like inputting this, would the other documents just be like the topo map or are, and I'm sorry if you guys are gonna explain that stuff here. Here we go.
Right.
Next
Yeah, the
screen.
topo map sharing agreement shapefile.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you,
And
Matt. Dottie, no further questions. Back to you.
perfect. Thanks, Mo. And great questions, Christina, especially as we go through this section. If you have any others, we'll be sure to get those answered, as well as I can add additional screenshots if needed or clarification from some of the questions you've asked. But for this section, we're going to be talking
Hey, Dottie,
about those
sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I have my hand raised, and before you go to the next session, I have my last
Of
question.
course, yeah.
Like, for the just like the other hybrid resources, can we also submit hybrid types such as the battery plus natural gas or fuel cell? Will they also look same as solar or wind, or will they be different in the RIM system?
Great.
So,
Great. Yep. Thank you, Matt.
so those kind of fuel type configurations will still be valid. The kind of stuff that we're showing here only pertains to hybrid resources that have a wind or solar component, and so only the wind and solar components are the components that need the information that we showed before. But those still, like natural gas, battery kind of configurations are still valid in RIMS.
Got you. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. I really appreciate these questions. Okay. So for this next section,
I still see Tina's hand raised. Just want to make sure if she still had a follow-up question. Tina, did you still have never mind.
I'm good, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so now we'll go into uploading and submitting these documents. I'll kind of explain what these are, what your action will be for them if there's any, and then also, I believe I do have some slides that talk about what happens after you hit submit, what kind of validations are in place. So starting off, the first key document, there's going to be 3 that we talk about, is our shapefile. So these are used to provide detailed geographic and technical information about a renewable resource, such as wind and solar components in a project. They are going to be used, you'll see, for project coordinates, met station coordinates, and then turbine information as it's applicable. So if it's a wind component, that's when you'll see that turbine. I want to point out for the shapefile, it'll be important that it's submitted as a zip. There's validations in RIMS to make sure that it is submitted this way, and you'll get error message or a validation error if something might be not submitted in that format, as well as naming convention, and I'll talk about what that looks like too. The next file is a sharing agreement. So this is only for solar components and only if they want to do this. So if it's applicable and that station wants to do sharing, this is basically a document that has signatures and information about the resource sharing. And it's typically in a Word or a PDF. And I'll show you the naming convention for that as well. And then the last thing that we'll talk about is the topo map. So this is for wind or solar. And this is just an illustrating of the locations of all met stations and wind turbines, if applicable, by their latitude and longitude. And then you'll see the file types for this is like the PDF or that Excel. So again, super high level. Now let's kind of break in a little bit more for each of these, starting with our shapefile. So for shapefile, naming convention will be a big component as you're uploading into RIMS. Again, you want to make sure that it does follow this naming convention because we have validations in place. So if we break it down, you'll see you'll start with your project key. So this is your reference number that you get. You'll have the shapefile, that actual word there. It's just showing us what you're submitting. And then if you have a component ID, so if this is for a wind or a solar, you'll see that component ID. So wind 1, solar 1, whatever component ID it is, as well as the version number. So if it's your first version, second, and so on. Just to show you some examples of that. So we have, for an example, for a hybrid project, you'll see that this is kind of how it spells it out for you. If you have a single project, you'll just see that component ID is kind of taken away. It's not there because you don't have one, as it is only required for a hybrid and hybrid co-located. If we continue on for shapefile, so we do have additional resources. So we have that readiness note that Mo put in the chat, and it's located on the training center. That is really a great example if you've never worked with shapefiles before for you to go through and see it. And so it goes through an example specifically, the Quantum Geographic Information System, the QGSI. Now I want to point out that while the ISO did use this software as an example, it's not the only option. Users have the ability to pick what other option they have. This is just the example that we provided. And then we also have templates for you to use. So for a solar project, you'll have the project and met station coordinates. And in those CSV templates, it shows you exactly how to format that information. And then for the wind, you'll see the addition of the turbine information, and that's located on our release planning page. But this is a great resource for you to kind of see, okay, how do I put one together? And I'll get that updated too, just to add how you upload it to RIMS, because I know when we created that, that was before we did this training, so I can get that updated with all of the information. I also want to point out that the naming convention, I know that with the underscores, sometimes it's like, are those part of it? Are those not? I'm pretty sure they are. I'm almost positive when I was looking at the BRS and working with subject matter experts, those are part of it. So you'll be sure to include that as you go through it. And when we get to a stopping point, SMEs, you feel free to chime in if that needs to be updated, but that should be part of it. And then I also see a question just to address it. Are there other softwares besides QGIS? There are. I can see if we can get a list of them. I did some research on some other ones, but I know that QGIS is the one that the ISO uses, so that's what I focused on. But I can see if we can provide you any other details about some other software options. So that is for shapefile. We'll come back to it. Now let's talk about sharing agreement. So sharing agreement is that agreement that we talked about. It's for solar components if they want this. It's not a requirement. It's only if it's something that they want to add. And it should look very similar to the naming convention you just saw for a shapefile. So you'll do the project key, your reference number. You have your sharing agreement, so that's the title that you're submitting. Again, if you have a component ID, this is the wind 1, solar 1. If not, you don't have one, as well as the version number. So likewise, I wanted to include some examples here just for you to see. So if you have a hybrid project, that's what it would look like. If you have a single project, that's what that would look like for you. And there's validations in RIMS to make sure that the naming is right. And depending on the project, it'll check that as well. And then if we continue forward for submitting a topo map, you'll see that it looks very similar, which is nice, with the project key, the title of what you're submitting, the component ID, and the version. Again, remember I put at the bottom kind of those formats that they need to be. So again, the PDF or Excel, as well as some examples. Now, I believe in the end of the training, some like extra slides for you, these are blown up. So if you wanted just like a full picture of the example, I did include that for reference. So after you have done the naming, you've figured out your files, and you're ready to upload, what you'll do is after you complete your component web form, this is the idealistic path that you take, is you go in, you fill in your web form, and then you upload your documents. Again, remember for the solar project, it's your shapefile, topo map, and then the sharing agreement if you have that. And then for wind, it's the shapefile and topo map. You'll upload the documents, you'll hit upload. And then after you do that, you'll see a submit button that will be available. And that's what Matt was kind of referencing earlier, how you'll be able to click submit, and you'll prompt the validations to run. So it'll run at each component level. So your shapefile, your topo map, and sharing agreement, it's all being checked together with those web forms that you filled out. And there are validations. So I believe the RIMS UI tells you some of the validations, but I know that you'll get an email. And so I have an example of the validations email. There's also, I know I can add an example after the training of the confirmation. I'll be sure I can add that. But this just shows you, and it emails because sometimes that RIMS UI can move really quickly. We want to make sure that you know exactly what needs to be changed or what needs to be edited. And so the resource owner will get this information, and they'll tell you you need to log into RIMS and make these updates. So I'll pause here. I know I saw a couple other questions in the chat, and I see a hand raised. I'll pass it to you, Mo, if you can help us navigate your questions.
Absolutely. We can start off with Tina. Tina, I do know you had a question in the chat as well, and then we'll follow with Alina as well. Great questions, by the way. Tina, your first question was, are the underscores part of the naming, part of the file naming convention? I believe this was back on slide 44. She just wants to confirm if the underscores are part of that. And we also reached out to, oh, sorry, Dottie, go ahead.
Yes, the underscores are part, and if there's any disagreement after we finish the presentation, when I send the email, I can add that confirmation, but I'm almost positive, yes.
Okay, shoot, I just forgot my other, oh, it was on the validation email. So is that going out? I saw you say project owner. Does that mean like whoever is submitting this documentation, or just everybody that's listed in the RIMS contacts in the project view? Is that...
Ooh, good question. Great question, actually. And you have such an eye for detail. I should have, instead of put project owner, maybe put resource owner. So these are the folks that are listed on this project, I believe, and I can make that update. But great question.
Okay, so it's everybody that's listed in RIMS under like the email contacts? Just to clarify.
I believe so. I believe
okay.
so, Matt, if you, I'm almost positive, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I think the other way the validation emails go, I think it's to the person that's uploading. Like when you do another document that you upload into RIMS, in bucket 3 for the attachment A. I think it's the actually emails back who's uploading. I don't know that it goes to everybody. I could be wrong on that, but okay. Either way, that's
a great question. I can confirm that too, because we don't want to say one thing and it's the other. So I'll confirm that for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. We do have Alina as well, who has her hand raised, and she also has a question in the chat. Alina, do you want to go ahead and ask your
Yes.
question first?
Yes,
Yeah.
first of all, thank you for all your responses. Really appreciate. Dottie did mention that Kaiso is going to provide us the list of software versions besides QGIS. Say, for example, we are still using QGIS. Will you guys be posting us the other versions too? Or what versions will you post if we are still using QGIS?
Are you asking, just to make sure I understand the question, if you're not using QGIS, are you asking if we will have other examples of
No, no,
shapefile or?
no. If even if we are using the software QGIS, can we use other versions as well?
Oh, okay, I think I understand. I believe yes. Matt, I'll see if you want to add into that.
Yeah. So So shapefiles created from other versions of QGIS, apart from what we may be using, should be valid. I think it's as long as the shapefile is following the conventions of like having all the file extensions mentioned earlier and meeting those validations, it should be fine. I don't think that the version will like impact the upload into RIMS, as long as whatever version of whatever software you're using is still creating a valid shapefile.
Got you. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Alina. Did you have any other further questions, Alina? I see your hands are still raised.
I'll put it down. No more questions.
Great questions, Alina. We love your questions. I am looking at the chat. I don't see any other questions outside of what was already covered for Tina and Alina. I'm also checking to see if there's any other hands raised. I don't want to miss those. Chunyu, you have your hand up. Go ahead and state your question.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So I do have some follow-up questions. So I think one of the questions Alina did put in the chat is, what is the other software besides the Quantum GIS? Is that I know this guy is a very specifically talk about the QGIS. Is any other software is being used?
That's a great question, Chenyu. I don't have a list with me. I can see if I can do some research and run it by SMEs to see if they have any. I just know that QGIS was one that we used for that example, and so that's what we provided. But I can take that as an action item to see.
Okay, sounds great. And we do have some other market sim questions. I guess we wait till when you talk about market sim, we can probably, yeah. Oh, okay. We can ask at that time then. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much.
Back to you, Dottie.
Okay, perfect. So now we can move on to market simulation, talk about that timeline, and then some other details, the details that we have. And so just to recap kind of what we have been doing, we did our external training, and now it's time to move on to market simulation. And then the next step will be that production for you. But for unstructured market simulation, so there will be one for hybrid resources, this project. And I know we don't have a hard date yet because we're still working on some details, as well as I know that a few city cases came in talking about access, asking to show folks how to do testing in RIMS or what that looks like. And I don't have the details just yet because we're still narrowing down some conversations internally. but we will be sending out that date as well as the access information through the email for folks joining, as well as I'll update these slides with the necessary steps. And then we also have our market simulation calls, which I'll make sure that Martin, who runs that, includes this information there as well. So I know it's not too much information. It's more of a, we're going to provide it to you very soon. I believe it's at the end of this week. We're trying to get that date picked and send out the corresponding information. But I did just want to provide you with that update. I'll pause because I know, Chenyu, you said you might have some questions before I go into like the other parts of Market Sim, because this is the bulk of the update I'm able to provide right now.
Yeah, may I ask the Market Sim questions now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. So I guess we have quite a few questions. First, I actually thinking about the email notification, right? If we were to do a map stage testing, would the email notification still will be triggered if some of the input validations input was incorrect and the email would trigger to the whole RIM users for example, for us, for PG&E? I guess that's the first question.
Good question. I will take that back as well. I'm pretty positive it'll just be, and that goes back to that also, Christina, your point about who did those validation emails go to. In the testing environment, it should go to how that resource, I believe, is identified, like who's on it and who we decide. But those are some of the internal discussions I'm still having with the team to figure out those logistics. So I'll be sure we have that answered for you.
I see. Thank you. And the second question we have is like, I understand when Dottie walked through the example. So if we want to, we don't have one currently in production, but we just want to go through the testing. So it looks like we need a project key. And so I guess that question we probably can also put in a CD ticket, whether CAISO can give us a fictitious project key so we can go through the motion of entering all the information and create a new resource in RIM and create a check file.
Yes, great question. And again, internal discussions, that's what I know Alina put in a ticket, and I was trying to see if we can incorporate it, but we're just wanting to make sure we get all the details ironed out on what that looks like, and I'll be sure to provide that for you.
Sounds good. I'm looking at our internal chat here. Okay. All right, I'm going to yield back, and if Alina might have some questions. Thank you.
Of course, thank you, Chenyu.
No, I don't have any questions. Just want to echo on Chenyu's question that we don't have a resource ID. We don't have a hybrid resource ID in production. So, you know, and we are interested in testing out this new functionality. So as I've put on my CD ticket as well, that we will have to create a new resource ID to test out the shape files, and also we'll need a fictitious project code.
Yes, and thank you so much for submitting that. I'll work with the team and I'll be sure that we respond back, and as well with everyone, all the details needed for this.
Thank you, Dottie. Appreciate.
Of course, thank you. Appreciate your questions.
We have a question from Tina as well. Tina, go ahead and state your question.
Okay. And hey guys, I have 2 questions. And if like I'll go ahead and throw them out. And then if you're going to mention them later in the training, just let me know. I can hold them till later. But one of them is, so like currently in the current process, we upload the site info sheet and topo map during bucket 1, and you know where resource ID is. We've been just using the project number for kind of like the initial site info sheet submission. And then after the resource ID is implemented into RIMS, then we re-upload it again with the resource ID. And I know that that's when you guys take it and send it off to the forecasting service provider for final approval. How is that going to work with this model, like of putting all this data in? Do we have to do it twice, or is it going to just kind of, I guess I'll pause there. Just like, how's it going to work?
Yeah, I can take that. So a nice thing that is getting changed with this is, so the review will happen initially, and it'll happen before the resource ID is assigned, and then it'll get conditionally accepted. And then when the resource ID is assigned, that will just get flipped to accepted, and you won't have to resubmit any of that.
Nice. Okay. All right. That's cool. Okay. And I just forgot my second one. So my second question. So I'll re-raise my hand once I remember it.
Of course. And I'll add that what Matt just said to the slides as well, just so it's there for folks when they refer back. Oh, I see you might remember it. I think I see a hand.
I did. Thank you. So, and then, sorry, and you guys might go over this later, but so if we have a client right now that is currently trying to make this model build that's closing at the end of this month, do you guys want the shape files? How do you guys want the shape files for right now? Do you want it like uploaded, emailed, and then would the ask be to redo it later? Or are you guys kind of doing for things that are in progress right now?
Great question. I see, Matt, you came off mute, I think.
Yeah, so right now, our plan is when the project goes live, any resources that have solar and wind that have not already been accepted, like they haven't had their site info and TopoMap accepted, will have to go through this process. They'll have to resubmit that info with the shapefile and using the new site info form. So if it's accepted ahead of go live, then you won't have to worry about it. But if it's still in the process at go live, then they'll have to go through this process rather than the old process.
Okay, so I'm just going to repeat back with me. So if I have a project right now that's looking to go into 25 month 6, and they're uploading all their bucket 1 deliverables, so it sounds like they should just wait till after April 9th when this goes into prod to upload their shapefile. Does that sound right?
Correct. Yeah, we don't right now in the current RIMS. We don't really have a way to accept those shape files or like the validations. So yeah.
Okay, and there's all right, perfect. Thank you. That was it for me.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you, Matt. Dottie, I'm looking in the list. I don't see any other hands raised, but I do want to pause just to make sure. Oh, we have one from Alina. Go ahead and state your question.
Yeah, so is GIS system compatible to create shape files? GIS.
Yes. Yeah, in the example, if I'm understanding, we use that system to create the shapefile.
Okay, so you mean GIS is compatible to create, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alina. Dottie, I'm not seeing any additional hands raised. I'm going to check the chat box just to make sure one more time. I'm not seeing any additional questions on here as well. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Dottie. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And the next couple slides are more of informational. So for if you want market simulation, if you have questions about the market simulation, which I know we just talked about, there were quite a few questions. I'm taking this back as action items, and we're going to be in communication with everyone, as well as the broader for folks maybe who were unable to attend. We'll make sure that they get this information about what it is and what that looks like. I'm going to skip this just because I know we answered some of those questions, and then I'll pause at the end. But in the spirit of wanting to always improve and also to make sure that this training is valuable, because we know you could take an hour from folks' days, you are all working on so much, and so we are very appreciative that you decided to spend this hour with us. So if you have any feedback on how we can make these better, please let us know. We do go through them and we read your comments. And you'll see here the instructor is, you can put Dottie or Dorothy, and then the training course is the hybrid resources, which we're doing today. And then this last slide here is, as I mentioned at the beginning, within a day or two, the recording will be posted to the training center. I'll also email it out for folks, so you'll get these slides with the updated versions if we've added things or the questions that you asked as well. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please reach out to customer readiness and we'll get back to you, or you can submit a city ticket or use the contact us, depending on how you reach out to the ISO. But I'll pause here, see if there's any last minute questions. We'll stay on, but thank you again so much for your participation this morning. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks, everyone.
Dottie, I got everything from the chat, so you're good.